Okay, so what we've discussed in class is the setbacks for the property. And to determine the setbacks, we've gone and consulted the LEP and the DCP for Leichhardt Council. We also discussed that technically the property belongs to the City of Sydney Council, when previously it belonged to the Leichhardt Council, but they are in a transition stage at the moment. So for the time being, until the draft LEP and draft DCP is finalised by the City of Sydney Council, we will be referring to the Leichhardt LEP and the Leichhardt DCP. So in the DCP, we went through some important sections that I pointed out, which considered what the side boundary setbacks were, and that we determined as 4 meters based on the information of the intended building height. Okay, so you have to refer to that graph that we saw in one of the first, I think it's the first 10 pages that we looked at of the DCP. So that means that we should draw a setback of 4 meters parallel to this this grid line, which is grid line number 1, and then a 4 meter setback from grid line number 5. Now the 4 meter setback for grid line number 1 is easy, because what you could do is just draw a line that's a standout color, such as, well, because we've got the grid red, we might make this green, and then just draw a line that is snapped to the grid line. Now that's green. So what we want to do now is press the tab key to select the green line and go Control D and move this in a direction that is parallel to the grid at 180 degrees, a distance of 4,000 millimeters. Okay, so that's the first setback. Now the second setback line, this one's a little bit more tricky, because this grid line number 5 is not parallel. Okay, now what you could do is the same thing, which is to draw a line that is running along grid line number 5. So you don't, in this case, you don't press the shift key, because the shift key will of course constrain this line to the parallel to the grid, and then you can move this. Now when you move this, if you press the shift key, you're going to then make it parallel to the grid, but you don't want it to be parallel to grid. You want it to be, you want to move this in a direction that is perpendicular to this line. Okay, so that it is parallel to this line, as in grid line number 5, and not parallel to the grid. So you're going to have to engage the drafting aids, which is to constrain to perpendicular. Okay, and it asks you, well, which is the perpendicular line that you want to constrain to, and it's this one. And so that means then when you're moving out at a distance of 4 meters, you're not actually at an angle of 0, you're at an angle of 0 degrees 15 minutes and 6 seconds, which is slightly off to 0. Okay, so we're going to move this out a distance of tab 4,000 and then enter. Okay, so oops, actually I moved the red grid line instead of the green one. Okay, so I'm just going to press OK, then go tab and then select the green line, and then use the constrain to perpendicular tool, and then move, oops, constrain to perpendicular, and then move out by 4,000. Okay, now that one might take a little bit of practice, so I encourage you to practice it a few times over, because what you want to be doing is this should be parallel to this. line and not parallel to the grid. Okay, so those are our side setbacks. And normally what you need to do on side setbacks for where the actual building's footprint is, you'd have to do a dimension, a boundary dimension, okay, which we'll do a little bit later. Now, the street setbacks are the guidelines in the council DCP is that the way you determine the street setbacks is that generally the setback for the street frontage should be flush with the frontages of the neighbouring buildings on either side. So the simplest example is for a terrace, your street setback is going to be in line with the front face of the terraces that are on either side of you. Okay, that's going to be what is required to be the street frontage. Now in this case, we have a situation where the front of this building is further back than the front of this building on this street, and that the building here setback is a lot further back than this building here. Okay, so what we want to do then is to create a line, and as the guide says, it must be from the front face of the building, so that's to the wall, not to the roof, to the front face of the building. Okay, so we're going to snap to the wall here. Ooh. Just zoom in a little bit more so I can make sure I can snap to the wall. There we go. Okay, and then the other line is from here. Make sure you're snapping to here. Okay, so this inside area bounded by the green lines is our footprint area. Okay, it's where we're allowed to build within the site.